SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සෝතයි.
Tonight, the cost of saving lives. The SPC chair says that Sri Lanka will need 65 billion rupees in total for vaccines, including for Pfizer booster shots.
We need to think of some mechanism to earn finances or share the burden of finances if we have to continue the problem.
Silent but deadly. Health experts warn the public to beware of a new silent COVID-19 killer.
There is some phenomenon called silent hypoxia. Patient can go into low level of oxygenation until the last seconds, and then there can be sudden death.
Helping friends. China assures Sri Lanka of continued assistance to tide over its economic challenges during a meeting between the country's parliamentary speakers. Stop the outflow. Top UK academic advises Sri Lanka to bring about a paradigm shift in its research focus to avoid further brain drain.
A lot of the developing countries recognize research costs money. They haven't got a huge amount of money. So one way of progressing the research ambition is to get inward investments.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Thursday, the 2nd of September 2021.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වලකයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Eknaik. Now then, the government will have to face a total vaccination bill of 65 billion rupees in order to source all the vaccines it needs to complete its target. This was revealed by State Pharmaceuticals Corporation Chairman and member of the Special Committee on COVID Control, Dr. Prasanna Gunasena, today, but added that this would also include enough Pfizer doses to begin booster shots to everyone as well. Speaking to Indivara Amwatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, Dr. Gunasena added that a mechanism must be set in place to generate such a large sum of funds to meet this requirement. In addition, he also rubbished claims of the health sector having insufficient tocilizumab, saying that the drug can only be given to COVID patients with specific conditions. Hence, Sri Lanka has enough in hand to tide it through the current global scarcity.
Addressing the progress of the country's vaccination targets, Chairman of the State Pharmaceuticals Corporation and member of the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control, Dr. Prasanna Gunasena says that the country not only has sufficient vaccine doses in the pipeline to complete the program by next month, but it has also confirmed an order for 15 million Pfizer vaccines, which will be utilized as booster shots.
You did say earlier that we should be able to complete inoculation of the full population by early October. Are we on course? And you mentioned the number of vaccine doses that are expected to arrive in Sri Lanka. Is that sufficient?
Last few months our predictions were all right, but we were expecting another additional million to come last August. But because of the pandemic situation, that 1 million delayed to the 5th. In addition to that, we have ordered another 14 million doses to be used to any needy categories for the third dose. We have secured another 14 million doses of Pfizer vaccine, which can be given as mix and match for any other vaccine given to the population. So we have that reserve coming towards the end of October and November, December. Definitely there won't be any inadequacy. Fourth night or fifth early morning, we are getting another 4 million. Every Monday, the Pfizer vaccine is also coming. Our total population is 23 million. And if we get down concentrating to inoculate 17.5 million population, then the total number should match.
You earlier mentioned that health authorities are in consensus over the need for a booster shot. What's the current stance?
There's a committee who decides upon the type of vaccines, the inoculations and the decisions. Based on their recommendation, they unanimously decided that Pfizer should be the booster dose dose. We started discussions with Pfizer and they agreed to give us the additional doses, and we have secured that.
What kind of funding availability does Sri Lanka have in the procurement process?
So far, we have spent 29.24 billion rupees for the vaccines that we have purchased. And for the additional doses as well as the booster, we have to pay another 36 billion 0.19 for the vaccines to come. The total will come to say 65 billion rupees, and usual Sri Lankan budget is about 58 billion rupees. Finding money was also a challenge. For the purpose of vaccination to this year, everything is set. Supposing if the next year also we face the same situation, we need to think of some mechanism to earn finances or share the burden of finances.
Meanwhile, as speculation runs wild on social media regarding a shortage of what has been said to be a vital life-saving drug for COVID pneumonia patients, named as tocilizumab, and with the opposition having cited this as an impending disaster, Dr. Gunasena sought to clear out the current misconceptions on the drug.
The drugs approved by the WHO for the treatment of COVID pneumonia patients, does Sri Lanka have enough?
Dexamethasone, of course, not an issue. Tocilizumab, that is actually a kind of a blood product which has been manipulated in such a way to control overreaction of our immune system. Now that drug has been recommended very recently by the WHO to be given to a very small cohort of people, where it is confirmed that the patient has only COVID, no other infection. If a patient with a different infection get this drug, the drug can kill the patient. So that is the message the people should get. End of July, State Pharmaceutical Corporation has handed over 650 vials of this medicine to the Ministry of Health. Private sector, of course, there is a local agent, he has to procure and get it, but due to the current high demand after WHO recommendation, they are not in a position to give the promised quantities to any country. We are closely discussing these matters through the Switzerland embassy as well as the European Union. Because of the high demand, there is huge number of counterfeit drugs circulating with the same name. So it has to be very carefully chosen through the legitimate agent.
Now then, health officials are warning the public of a new silent killer COVID-19 related condition that you may not even know you have. Called silent hypoxia, the condition arises when the amount of oxygen in your blood reaches extremely low levels, which could lead to the sudden death before symptoms show. Meanwhile, a decision on whether the curfew will be entered or extended, I should say, or not, is to be announced after tomorrow's COVID-19 task force meeting headed by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Silent hypoxia is a condition that occurs in some COVID-19 patients when oxygen saturation levels in their bloodstream are exceedingly low, which means they aren't getting enough oxygen into their lungs. However, the danger of this condition is that patients may not display significant symptoms such as breathlessness. Health experts say that typically when a patient begins to show signs of silent hypoxia, they may already have other COVID-19 symptoms and may be in a critical condition.
There can be certain exacerbations or complications that might come as part of the debilitation that can take place as a result of becoming infected or becoming sick with COVID-19. And there is some phenomenon called silent hypoxia where the brain will not receive the signals related to the lack of oxygen from the lungs as expected, and patient can go into low level of oxygenation until the last seconds, and then there can be sudden death that can happen, and this has been reported among the patients as well as some people who have few weeks after discharge from the hospital. We don't know whether they are still suffering from the disease or whether they are totally cured.
With that, the question must be asked as to how a COVID-infected patient can determine if they have this condition. The answer to this is by using a pulse oximeter. If oxygen levels dip below 94%, then it may be a cause for concern. The experts, however, advise the public not to depend on a pulse oximeter to determine when to seek medical help and urge them to do so with the slightest onset of regular COVID symptoms.
What I would like to advise everyone who got the disease, especially those who are at the extreme of age as well as those who are suffering from comorbidities, please take extra care about your disease conditions and other health conditions and look after your health for a few months until you are becoming fully normal as much as possible, so that will prevent such things to great extent.
In the meantime, with the emergence of new virus variants in the world, such as the recent discovery of the C12 COVID-19 variant in South Africa, Health experts are calling for strategic biobubble guidelines to prevent these variants from entering the country.
There are recommendations about the risk of bringing tourists through the biobubble, and we also admit that different type of variants can behave in the environment in different manner. So therefore, we have got recommendations from different experts that the current biobubble system may not be effective to control the existing variants of COVID-19 strains. So therefore, again, I would like to urge the experts who are studying on this matter to provide the alternatives to make sure that to overcome such problems or such risks, that so that we can employ such options to make sure that the risk that may be posing as a result of the biobubble in the light of this new corona can be minimized.
Meanwhile, a decision on extending the ongoing curfew is to be taken tomorrow at the COVID-19 task force meeting chaired by the President.
The Ministry of Health has decided to begin inoculations of everyone between 20 and 30 years of age from today. Meanwhile, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena announced that a survey is being conducted at the MOH level to track down everyone who hasn't taken at least a single dose of a COVID-19 vaccine.
With the inoculation of people above 30 years about to conclude soon, the government has taken steps from today to begin targeting anyone between 20 and 30 years of age at the district level. In a meeting at the Ministry of Health today, Subject Minister Khalia Ramukwella instructed officials to expedite the process of administering vaccine to 3.7 million people in this age group. The vaccinations of this target group are expected to be concluded by the end of October. Meanwhile, during yesterday, 412,202 people were inoculated against COVID-19. The figure includes 61,914 first-dose immunizations and 412,202,000 second-dose immunizations. Further, the total number of persons who have obtained the first dose as of last evening stood at 12,564,209. Of that number, 8,582,094 people have obtained the second doses.
This number of doses includes the vaccination of people who are between 80 to 30, where we have vaccinated a lot of factory workers, other frontline workers, including healthcare workers, as well as triforces. So those people or the statistic has to be excluded.
In the meantime, the country has now inoculated 80% of people above 18 years with a single dose of COVID-19 vaccine. In addition, 53% of people in this age group have received both doses.
Right now we are doing a survey by MOH area wise to get the exact figures which are not vaccinated. So we will be starting the mopping up vaccination after completing the second dose, hopefully mid-September. And we are expecting another 4 million of vaccine this week, and it will be distributed throughout the island as the second dose of vaccination, as well as for the mopping up of where the vaccinations were not done.
We will see you on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Finance Minister Basil Rajpaksha has called on the Chinese government to proceed with a $1.5 billion fiscal transfer between the two central banks, which is currently in limbo due to agreement technicalities. It came during a meeting between the parliamentary speakers of China and Sri Lanka. Accordingly, Speaker of China's Parliament, Li Zhangshu, assured the Sri Lankan government of China's continued support to overcome its economic and pandemic-related challenges.
The first diplomatic meeting between a high-profile delegation of the Parliament of the People's Republic of China and the Parliament of Sri Lanka was held on Tuesday, led by the chairman of China's National People's Congress Standing Committee, Li Zhangshu, and Sri Lanka's Parliamentary Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardena. During the discussion, the Chinese Speaker Li assured that the Chinese government will do its utmost to help Sri Lanka overcome its economic challenges and its struggles with COVID-19. The discussions were also attended by a number of high-profile Chinese officials, including the Vice Chairman of the National People's Congress Wu Weihua and Finance Minister of the People's Republic of China, Liu Kun. At the meeting, Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardena requested the government of China to encourage Chinese companies to invest in the Colombo port city and the Hambantota port, and also invited all friendly nations to make use of the opportunities these projects offer and help Sri Lanka prosper in its journey of becoming a global hub. Also present at the meeting, Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa called on the Chinese government to look into the $1.5 billion fiscal transfer between the two central banks, which is currently at a halt due to agreement technicalities, as a measure to help Sri Lanka overcome its current economic challenges. The minister also requested to facilitate the expansion of industries such as garments, tea and gems to enter the Chinese market under the Sri Lanka-China Free Trade Agreement. The finance minister also expressed eagerness to facilitate the establishment of a regional headquarters of the China Development Bank in the vicinity of the Colombo port city.
Vice-Chancellor of the University of Leicester, Professor Nishan Kanagaraja, says that the only way Sri Lanka can prevent a brain drain of its brightest research minds is by opening the doors for private investment into research and give academics the opportunity to come up with solutions for Sri Lanka. Professor Kanagaraja added that Sri Lanka needs to move towards a new line of thinking which encourages open thought and the power of questioning in its students from a young age.
Addressing a research symposium organized by the Sri Lanka High Commission in the United Kingdom and the Association of Sri Lankan Professionals in the UK, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Leicester, Professor Nishan Kanagaraja, offered his opinion on what Sri Lanka needs to change in order to transform itself into a more research-focused country. Primarily, Professor Kanagaraja says that Sri Lanka needs to start at the very bottom by encouraging a culture of curiosity among its children.
And the first thing I would say is that to any good research, you need good people. Ultimately, research is solved by ideas. And very often the ideas are generated by creative people. So we need to create a community of scholars, researchers who are creative, who are passionate, who want to develop that skill. So there is a lesson in the education system in Sri Lanka to think, how do we inculcate the passion in schools? How do we train our young people to aspire to be researchers? A very simple example, very often when we were growing up, when I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, when you're in the midst of your elders, they're all sitting and talking, and you try and say something, they will say, you're 9-year-old, what do you know? That is a typical response you might get in Sri Lanka. Whereas in the UK, you would be encouraged to express your opinion, encouraged to question the conventional wisdom. So what that means is that at a very young age, we curtail this curiosity and passion for asking questions. And I think we need to create that environment within our schools where it's okay to ask questions, because that's how you lead progress. That's how you come up with development.
Professor Kanagaraja also added that the country needs to do more to prevent a brain drain due to the lack of resources and infrastructure by attracting multinational organizations to invest in research carried out by Sri Lankan academics.
Now, the reason in the US, in the UK, in Japan, in China, they are successful research economies, because once you complete your research degree, you can work in university and continue your research, but it's not easy. There are limited job opportunities in universities. But what next? You need industry. You need other organizations in your country that can recruit these talented researchers and give them opportunities to pursue their research career. If not, we will not attract the best people to come into research, because they will see this is a dead end. And that requires investment. A lot of the developing countries recognize research costs money. They haven't got a huge amount of money. So one way of progressing the research ambition is to get inward investments, get the major corporations to come and invest and take some of the shared risk. Until we do that, I'm sorry to say it'll be hard for some of the researchers in Sri Lanka to compete with the top researchers while living in Sri Lanka. They have to emigrate, or they have to find other ways of progressing that research career. But I don't think that's sustainable, because some of our best researchers need to stay in Sri Lanka. Some of the problems that matter to Sri Lanka, nobody else is going to solve it for us. We have to come up with a solution. And if we don't retain a research community in Sri Lanka, tackling the problems that face Sri Lankans, then we will be missing out as a community.
In line with the 70th anniversary celebrations of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, two of its former presidents, Chandrika Kumartunga and Maithripala Sirisena, issued video statements today. The statements were polls of party in effect, with former President Sirisena urging all political parties to work together to come up with a strategy that will benefit the country, eradicate terrorism and take it forwards, while former President Kumartunga expressed severe disappointment in the current status of the party.
The anniversaries of two of Sri Lanka's most formidable and renowned political parties responsible for shaping Sri Lanka's history, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the United National Party, are to be celebrated this month. In line with the celebration of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party's 70th anniversary, which falls today, two of the party's former presidents issued statements today.
පරිශ්‍රයේදී අප LTT ත්‍රස්තවාදයෙන් අත්මිදී තවත් වසර 10කට ඇවෑමෙන් ඉස්ලාම් අන්තවාදී ත්‍රස්තවාදීන්ගේ බිහිසුණු සිදුවීමක් සිදු වුණා. ඒ ප්‍රහාරය සම්බන්ධයෙන්ද එම ප්‍රහාරයෙන් පසු උද්ගතන දේශපාලන ගාම්‍යයන් පිළිබඳවද ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂය හොඳින්ම දැනුවත්. විශේෂයෙන්ම මීට සති කිහිපයකට පෙර ආතුව ඇෆ්ගනිස්තානයේ සිදු පෙරළිය කලාපීය වශයෙන් කෙසේ බලපාන්නේද යන කරුණු ගැඹුරින් විසඳමින් ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂය ලෙස අප පටු දේශපාලනික සීමාවෙන් ඔබට යමින් ත්‍රස්තවාදයේ කළමනාකරණය කිරීමේ අවශ්‍යතාවය පැහැදිලිව අවධාරණය කරනවා. සමකාලීන සියලු බලවේග සමගින් ජය දිනවන වැඩපිළිවෙලකට අවතීර්ණ වීමට සූදානමින් සිටින්නයි මම ඔබෙන් ගෞරවයෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
මේ පක්ෂය තුල තමයි මම ඉපදුනේ. ඇදුනේ වැඩුනේ. කොහොමාරි දැන් ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂයට අයත් වෙලා තියෙන ඉරණම ගැන මම ඉතාමත් දුක් වෙනවා. තාමත් උදේට නැගිටිනකොට මට නිකන් ඇඳෙන්න නැගිටින්න හිතෙන්නේ නැහැ. මේකට වෙලා තියෙන දේ ගැන හිතනකොට නිකන් පණ නැති වෙනවා වගේ වෙනවා. 2015 මම අවුරුදු 9ක් දේශපාලනයෙන් ඈත් වෙලා ඉඳලා නමුත් මං ආවේ විශේෂයෙන්ම රටට වෙන ඇබැද්දිය දැක්ක නිසාත් පක්ෂයට වෙලා තිබුණ ඇබැද්දිය දැක්ක නිසාත් මේක අපිට ගොඩ ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියලා හිතාගෙන මහා දර්ශනයක් අපි ඉදිරිපත් කරුවා. හැබැයි ඒක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම කඩා වැටෙනවා. කඩා විඳ දැම්මේ තනිකර එක පුද්ගලයෙක්. අපි බලයට ගෙන ආපු පුද්ගලයා මට පස්සේ ආපු නායකයෝ දෙන්නම ඒකට වග කියන්න ඕනේ.
In the meantime, Chairman of the United National Party, Vajira Abhivardhana, said today that the leader of the party, Ranil Wickremesinghe, will issue a virtual statement on the 5th of September, in line with the 75th anniversary celebrations of the party.
Now, prison officers have recovered a mobile phone from the prison cell of MP Rishad Badiuddin, who is currently in remand custody at the Magazine prison. Prison spokesperson Chandan Ekanaga stated that the mobile phone was found in the possession of the parliamentarian yesterday. He stated that the chief jailer and another jailer had spotted the MP speaking on the mobile phone when passing by his cell, after which the MP had thrown it out of the cell's window. The mobile phone was subsequently taken into custody by the officers and handed over to intelligence units for further investigations. The prison spokesperson said that the MP will be presented before a prison tribunal with regard to the offence. Now, the Foreign Ministry today has issued a statement opposing the contents of the resolution put forth by the United States House of Representatives in May 2021. The ministry states that the government of Sri Lanka vehemently opposes the contents of the resolution that contains unsubstantiated allegations along with unfounded and blatant lies that raise grave suspicions of its intentions. Considering the inaccurate, biased and one-sided nature of the proposed resolution, the ministry says that this is not a mere human rights resolution but appears to be one influenced by LTTE sympathizers in the US Congress, shouldering agenda of a terrorist outfit proscribed in 32 countries including the USA. The government of Sri Lanka is in the process of submitting its response through the Sri Lanka Embassy in Washington, D.C. to representatives of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and House Subcommittee on Asia and the US Embassy in Colombo. Now then, photographs submitted by two Sri Lankan wildlife photographers, Buddhilini de Souza and Gagana Mendis Wickremesinghe, have been selected from among over 50,000 submissions made from over 90 countries for the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. The 57th edition of the competition, which is organised by the Natural History Museum in London, is scheduled to announce the winners of each category on the 12th of October.
A number of stunning entries to the Wildlife Photograph of the Year competition was submitted by over 50,000 passionate and skilled photographers from 95 countries. From a record number of entries submitted to the 57th edition of the competition, organised by the National History Museum in London, a selection of highly commended images was released on Tuesday evening. Among them were two photographs captured by two Sri Lankans. The Great Swim by Buddhilini de Souza and Lockdown Checks by Gagana Mendis Wickremesinghe were officially selected to much praise. Chair of the judging panel Ros Kidman Cox said that with most travel plans cancelled over the past year, photographers seem to have spent extra time considering what gems to submit. She added that the results is a collection of both thought-provoking images and that once in these dark times reminds us of the joy and wonder to be had from nature. The category winners will be announced on October 12 and will feature in an exhibition set to open on the 15th of October and run until the 5th of June 2022.
Now then, the Finance Ministry has announced plans to raise a foreign currency term financing facility in US dollars, euros, renminbi and yen this year. The facility is expected to be raised at a fixed rate or a floating rate with a maturity period of 1 year or more. According to an announcement on the central bank website, the proceeds of the facility are to be used to finance government expenditure, which will be approved in the upcoming budget. Now, with that, the Ministry of Finance, on behalf of the government, has invited proposals from banks, institutional investors and investment houses for this purpose. According to the conditions mentioned in the request, drawn down or availability of the funds must be made available within 5 days of the finalization of the required document. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.